Hey, there's a live recording symbol. That must mean we're live. Hello and welcome to Post Loons. It is our pleasure to be here this evening with you, regardless of the fact that you probably took no pleasure from the soccer game you just sat through. So feel free to cleanse the last 2 hours of your life from your mind with us as much as we can as we break it down with you. My name is David Naylor. It's my pleasure to be here tonight hosting Post Loons for the very first time, back in the soccer podcast hosting seat for the first time in like 3 years. Pre-pandemic goodness. And for the very first time, I'm joined in this podcast by John Marthaler. How are you, sir?
It is my pleasure to be here with you.
We've never been on a pod together before. This is great.
I know. Do we know the same language? Are we allowed to talk to each other? How does this work?
At least vaguely, right? Like,
yeah,
we will be more in sync than Minnesota United's attack were tonight. Am I right? Bada bing, bada boom.
You are correct, sir.
Off early. So, as you may know, since you're joining us here, Minnesota United played in Kansas City against Sporting Kansas City this very evening at Mercy Park. Final score of that game was 3-0 at Kansas City. Minnesota United offered very little of interest over the course of that game. Goals from, I should have looked at first names. Rosero for Kansas City. Danny Rosero in the 9th minute, Daniel Shallowy in the 22nd minute, and Gadi Kinda in the 84th minute for Kansas City's goals this evening. Before we get started with the breakdown, reminder that we are live on YouTube, and feel free to subscribe and leave a thumbs up and give us that engagement. That helps us a ton as we try to build up what we're doing here at Sota Soccer. On a related note to that, if you're on YouTube or on many of the other platforms we have, you can leave us a question or a comment or a take to be read live on the air and responded to. I see we already have a couple of people posting comments, including that our audio is dead. Is our audio still dead, Chris? Are we still dead?
We better not be.
I hope not, because I'm still talking.
I've been hearing you the whole time. You know, even if it's just you talking to me, that's worth it for me personally.
Right. Like
everyone else might have trouble, but as long as I can hear you, David.
Let me click on some buttons real quick before I start talk too deep. Talk too much further.
The buttons, do the button clicking. That was our button clicking song. We need a tip jar just for these improv songs that we're doing.
Right. Like, I'm not even all the way through my intro yet, and I feel like stuff is broken. Oh, it was on my side. Hooray. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Okay, I'll keep talking now. So, your comments. Hey, I can hear you. You're good. Thank all of you for being here and telling us that we're good. I appreciate that. So, that's showing how you can leave comments, and I can show them on the air, and we can respond to them.
That's right. What a good demonstration.
This is a good test of all the features for me. I appreciate it.
What a two-way street we have going here.
Right, exactly. Another thing to note, if you are a fan of the program and a fan of Sota Soccer, you are more than welcome to subscribe to us and directly support us at patreon.com/Sota Soccer for as low as $3 per month. That ensures that we get to do things like this, that gets you exclusive access to interviews and content and podcasts and all kinds of wonderful, wonderful things that we are doing there. John and I are getting paid to be here, which is great. That doesn't work without people on Patreon supporting us. So if you are already a Patreon supporter, we really, really appreciate you. If you're not, please consider joining that effort. Now that I've got all the promo material, let's dig into this game. John, what was the first of your 3 things to respond?
We could just keep doing promos for the whole time, and that would probably be...
I can just keep doing ad. I'll just keep doing ad.
It would be less sad. Yeah. We're going to do we're going to make up our own ad reads. Stamps.com. Have you heard about this Stamps.com?
I'm wearing a very nice
every
Adidas
other
hat.
podcast.
Hooray, Adidas.
Let's see. My first thing.
Where do you want to start?
We can start. I want to start with. Let's start with the first half, and specifically the first thing that I noted as part of the 3 things was the midfield just completely disappearing. I tweeted something like, I always feel like a 5-3-2 works better if all 3 midfielders don't go missing for the entire first half, but that's kind of what happened. It was just sort of a weird setup. Somehow it seemed like Robin Lod was playing as the defensive midfielder, and Kervin Arriaga and Hassani Dotson were playing as sort of, the number 8 sort of advanced midfielders, the creators in the middle of the park. And it seemed like none of them was in the spot that they were comfortable in. So it really just seemed, I like the way the 5-3-2 looked in previous matches. Minnesota switched to it sort of as a desperate thing late in the Vancouver match, and it really seemed to turn things around. They played it against Philadelphia, and we wouldn't be talking about whether it was bad or good if they hadn't given up goals with the last kick of both regular time and extra time. But in this one, it seemed like somehow it just didn't work. The 3 guys in the middle of the field just seemed lost.
And that's the most confusing thing apart of it, is exactly what you pointed out, is they've played this formation in each of their last 2 games. They didn't. Mm-hmm. Did they start the Philly game with it? I feel like they did.
Yeah, I think they did.
Yeah, so they started with it in the Philly game, and obviously the personnel weren't 100% the same, but clearly this is a setup they've been working on. They used it in Vancouver late in that game, and for this to just be a complete flop, I literally wrote last week about how much I liked Robin Lod in this midfield setup,
right?
And liked seeing him playing at the 8, but he needs to play at the 8 for me to like the setup. So it
literally seemed like they, Adrian Heath even said, "Oh, we haven't had much time to work on it yet." It was like, "Oh, we had some time to work on it finally, and it got worse once we worked on it."
That's not a great indicator.
Not a great indicator of whatever they were working on, I guess.
My first of my 3 things is also kind of a first half stat, which is the fact that Minnesota United did not register a single chance from open play on target until a chance of any kind at all until the 54th minute in this match. If you go to the MLS recap of this game and look at the stats of this page, they have a nice little graph of where the XG happens in the game. If you ignore Sang-Min Jung's penalty kick attempt, which is an 80% XG addition, a 0.8 XG addition, there was nothing on the Minnesota United graph until the 54th minute when Franco Fragapane had a half chance. Yeah. Nothing. 0.0. Nothing. Well, so let alone the fact that the defense has flopped from what was carrying them early this season, which was they were getting clean sheets or getting close to clean sheets, and get a 0-0, get a point on the road. Like a road point in MLS is great. That's what you want in this game. When you give up 2 goals in the first 25 minutes of a match and offer absolutely nothing going forward, you're probably going to lose a lot of your matches.
It remains as true now as it ever was, that if you're going to score a goal, you have to take a shot.
I was not the only one. John and I already corresponded about this on one social media or another, but seeing Luis Amarilla take, I believe, Minnesota United's first shot on goal in the 70th minute of the game, that wasn't a penalty kick, was I was happy, and it made me sad that I was happy about that making me happy.
By that time, I'm sure that most Minnesota United fans, everything was kind of blurry anyway. So
I'm not going to lie. I did not pay as much attention to the second half as I probably should have for hosting a podcast about it. And I don't feel that bad about it. Real talk. What would you hit second in your 3 things?
Well, the second thing was sort of related to the first thing. They again at halftime they brought on Franco Fragapane. They took off Brent Coleman and sort of switched back to the 4-2-3-1 they're used to. It was a little bit strange because at least in the early stages of the second half, it was a lot of looking at what was on the field and going, well, I guess Fragapane is playing in sort of the central attacking number 10 role. Well, no. Well, Hassani Dotson's popping up there. I guess no. Well, is Lod there? I'm not. It was a little bit unclear who was playing where. I think that got a little bit more ironed out when they brought on Luis Amarilla and Mender Garcia a little later in the half. But at the same time, at that point it was just disjointed. It was we've seen it a million times in Kansas City now. It's every time they go down to Kansas City. Number one, they talk about how much they respect Kansas City, and apparently they respect them too much, because every time they go down to Kansas, 3-0 is not a bad result for Minnesota and Kansas City. Usually it's 4-0.
That's correct.
Yeah. 3-0 is pretty proud average. That's about the median. 4-0 is about as bad as it gets. Again, I don't want to just sit here and read my social media feeds, but I did say every time they go down there, I end up tweeting the fact that Minnesota's never lost 5-0, and that's what they're aiming for in this game. Just don't lose 5-0. They've lost 6-1. They've lost 5-1 a couple times, but never 5-0. So
this is in fact, if I may pull
hashtag Kansas goals.
If I may pull a stat here, this is the first time in their last 3 appearances in Children's Mercy Park that they haven't allowed 4 goals.
Ooh, it's improvement. It's on the way up.
3 is actually, that's so bad.
Never mind that Kansas City had scored 5 goals in 11 games coming into this.
And never mind the fact that they were bad last year and they got thumped.
Yeah.
They're bad this year and they got thumped.
Yep.
Like, this is one of the bottom 2 teams in the West, or it still is, but by less now.
There's something. I don't know what the curse is. Maybe something to do with the Kansas Speedway just throws them off.
And that leads into one of my points, which is the fact that Minnesota is, I think they came into this game 11th in the West. So I don't think they actually moved in the standings, because when I looked at the standings earlier in the week, there's a whole 10 teams in MLS were tied on 12 points. They still have 12 points. So that didn't change, because that's not how soccer works. But Kansas City now, who is in 14th and stayed in 14th, has 9 points and is only 3 points back of them. And then you have, I want to say, RSL and Austin, who are 1 point and 2 points behind them, respectively, at time of recording. I know RSL is playing right now against LAFC and are losing, so they might stay there. But they're not that far from dropping down into not just out of the playoff places, but into the basement of the Western Conference. And a result like this, and a result like losing in Vancouver despite the comeback effort, it's not getting better.
Yeah, they might not have dropped all the way to last place, but they really have dropped into that group of teams that everyone knows they don't need to care about in MLS. Kansas City was already there. There's just sort of that grouping down at the bottom of the standings where everybody says, yeah, they're terrible, move along. And the only thing that ever happens to interest people is that somebody gets fired or somebody rips off a couple of wins or something. But there really is just sort of a grouping of teams where people just want to ignore them. And Minnesota is now 6 games without a win. 5 of those are losses. They're firmly in that group of bad teams in MLS.
And the fact that, in MLS, they still haven't won at home.
Yeah.
Which, tonight had nothing to do with, but that's been their saving grace, as they've been so great at Allianz Field since it opened, basically. And they don't have that yet this year, so they're really in danger if they can't pull out results on the road now, if they can't fix their home form.
Mm-hmm.
What was your third point, John?
The third thing I was going to talk about is, I don't feel like we've talked about this a lot. Obviously, you and I haven't talked. We already said that this is the first time we're talking on a podcast, but overall, I haven't seen a lot of talk about this. I think we're at the point where we need to start talking about Dane St. Clair. Minnesota gave up 3 goals tonight. I don't know what Kansas City's expected goals were, but my guess it was I was going to say it was somewhere around the 1 area. You look up the stats, and whether you look at expected goals for, say, Football Reference, or you look at American Soccer Analysis, you look at the post-shot stuff, or even if you get deep into the sort of the advanced numbers like the goals added stuff at American Soccer Analysis, no matter where you look, Dane St. Clair has been the worst goalkeeper in MLS this year. And there was one really big save he made in Vancouver. I think it was a 1-on-1 and he got a leg out and deflected it. But beyond that, I can't think of really a big save that he's made for Minnesota this year. And we're talking about going back to sort of midway through last year, about the All-Star game last year, where he had an amazing first half that was sort of highlighted by the first game where he came in against New York and made 7 unbelievable saves or something like that. But if they're not part of this defensive problem, it's not just, the defense is giving up a lot of chances. It's Dane St. Clair is not offering much of anything in goal. And a little bit of that before now, you can sort of chalk up, it's small sample size. It's early in the season. They're a third of the way through the MLS season now. That's 11 games. They got a 34-game schedule, and Dane St. Clair is firmly rooted to the bottom. There's no numbers that I have seen that are pointing to anything else. And I think it matches the eye test. It's time to worry about it. Minnesota sort of took for granted that, oh, well, we've got St. Clair, that at least the goalkeeping is going to be good. And now, is the goalkeeping good?
Because he was their saving grace early last season. Because early last
Yes.
season looked a lot like early this season, where
Yep.
they leaned on their defense, they leaned on the counterattack, and they leaned on Nate St. Clair to get them results. And I would say that the defense has been better on the sample that we've had,
Yep.
but St. Clair has been worse, which hasn't necessarily helped them get better results.
And, you know, we talk a lot about Minnesota's finishing, which obviously that's a fair topic. Their finishing hasn't been good, but their finishing has been as bad as their finishing has been. St. Clair, if you look at sort of the flip numbers of underperforming the expected goals with finishing, but St. Clair is underperforming the expected goals with his goalkeeping as well. You combine those two things together, it's no wonder they're dropping down into that basement in the standings.
Yeah, and that all kind of leads into my third thing, which is the fact that stealing from a stat that was brought up in the broadcast late in this game, but this is Minnesota's third straight game, including the U.S. Open Cup, allowing 3 goals.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost impossible to win games in MLS with that being your defense, particularly coming from a team that, as I've written on sotasoccer.com, as many people have talked about, as we've talked about elsewhere, this team was entirely reliant on their defense going into this game. They have scored 10 goals on the season. That is tied for second worst in the entire Western Conference. The entire MLS. There's only 3 teams in the entire league that have scored less goals than they do. They have. And you can do okay with that. Houston is in 6th place in the Western Conference, having only scored 10 goals because they've only allowed 8. Minnesota has now allowed 14 goals. Their goal difference is negative, and they've not been able to adjust to it in circumstances other than that U.S. Open Cup game, which obviously that took PKs, and they couldn't seal the deal at the end of normal time and at the end of extra time. And I'm going to bring up a comment from Foot Trap 10 on YouTube here. We came into preseason with a solid backline. Sure didn't see it tonight. We weren't rewarded for the risk of pushing the fullbacks far forward. Would you agree with that point as a part of the problem with the 5-3-2 formation?
Well, I think it's an interesting point to talk about the fullbacks, especially because one of the biggest keys in terms of how Minnesota is playing this year that's making them sort of more defensively is, at least from what I've seen, it looks to me like they are in general pushing the fullbacks forward less. When they play out of that 4-2-3-1, especially back when Roman Metanier was playing right back, a lot of the time it was just a lot of fullbacks bombing down the lines. They haven't done as much of that this year, from what I can see, partially because I think they're just trying to stay defensively solid and have those fullbacks stay home a little bit more. So I think it's an interesting point to look at the 5-3-2 and say, well, in that formation, you have to push the fullbacks forward. And, you know, maybe that is the key of why switching to this formation ended up making the defense a little more unstable.
Well, and to plug myself again, because I wrote about this
yesterday. Plug yourself right now.
I wrote about this yesterday on sotasoccer.com. Michael Boxall and Mickey Tapias have both had outstanding seasons at the heart of this defense, both to the eye test and statistically. They were both top 10 in MLS in interceptions going into this game. Boxy in particular had a completely unsustainable rate of interceptions that would have multiplied out over the course of the season, would have had him lead the entire league in interceptions. Now, that's both them playing well and them being put under immense pressure by Minnesota's lack of interest in possessing the ball. I've written that's not necessarily a bad thing in the past, but if you just the math of it is the more pressure you invite onto your center backs and onto your back line, the more likelihood there is that there's gonna be a mistake. Like Boxy and Tapias have been great for the early part of this season. They are why strong part of why the defense has been as good as they were. They weren't up to stuff tonight as much, and they lost.
Yep. Yeah, and that's going to happen. And I think there will probably be a few people who are blaming Brent Kallman just because he's in there and he's a veteran and whatever. I don't think this is Brent Coleman's doing. I don't even think it's the formation's doing. These things are going to happen. The first Kansas City goal was from a corner. That's going to happen sometimes. Goals will be scored from corners. Obviously, you can look at the second one, the third one, the match is kind of gone. I don't know how much stock you can put into an 84th minute goal in a game that's already 2-0. The second one was a great finish from Shallowy, but you don't necessarily look at the defense and go, well, this is all the back line's fault or even all the fullbacks' fault. Some of this stuff is just going to happen. It's just right now, the combination of other teams finishing their chances and Minnesota not finishing their chances, whatever the causes of those things are, making them bad. It's real bad.
We'll jump back into the show in just 1 minute, but first I've got to tell you about our friends over at Pence Homes. Owned by Minnesota United fan Nate Pence, Pence Homes was founded on the idea of providing customer service that exceeds expectations and making the home buying and selling process as simple as possible. Nate and his team specialize in the Twin Cities and can help you navigate this ever-evolving market with the right tools, technology, and expertise. Pence Homes knows how to help you get the most for your house and get you into the home of your dreams while staying in your budget. Contacting Nate is really simple. Just go to pencehomes.com or email him directly, nate@pencehomes.com. Pence Homes proudly supports local Minnesota soccer clubs, Minneapolis City and Minnesota Aurora, and we're extremely grateful they're extending that support to us here at Sota Soccer. pentzhomes.com or email nate@pencehomes.com.
Yeah, you got to say, Nate, we talked about Patreon already. Nate Pence is like the super Patreon. This is a different level of Patreon. If you sponsor the site, that's even better than Patreon. If you have Pence Homes money, feel free to email. What's Jeremy's email address? I don't have Jeremy's email address. Feel free to email him.
Hit him up on Twitter. He's there.
Super, yeah. We call that the super paid. We should just have Nate on here every time to just yell. He could just yell about whatever he wants.
And as someone who has spent a non-zero amount of time looking at homes in the state of Minnesota, as someone who doesn't currently live there, Nate is who I go to first to look for houses and to look for information about the market and about that stuff. So, like, straight up, use his resources. It's a wonderful resource to be able to look at and be able to keep an eye on as someone who might want to move back to Minnesota at some point. No big deal.
And I think personally, if you need a realtor, you also need a realtor who's got an opinion on whether Minnesota should play a 5-3-2 or a 4-2-3-1 in the next game. Obviously,
and that's what we'll start to make it better. Our show.
And that's why Nate Pence is here for you.
From Eric and CD on YouTube, any chance we ever see the 5-3-2 again?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. They went away from it in this match, but it was good against Vancouver. It was fine. I don't necessarily know. You look at this and go, well, that goes in the garbage can. We'll never see it again. That said, I feel like they've tried 3 at the back before and not stuck with it in the same way. This is, going back years, but it really is. I feel like as much as anything, wanting to switch to a 5-3-2 has more to do with trying to find somebody in the front of the attack that is going to be able to be effective. And they're, as much as anything, they're trying to figure out, is there a combination of attackers that they can play that will unlock somebody?
And that was one of the twists we saw tonight, is we haven't seen Bongi Hongwane up top in a game before. So,
but then in the U.S. Open Cup, he scored 2 great strikers goals, and he set another one up. And you look at that game and you go, Bongi Hongwane is the number 9 of the future for this team. Or you look at John, just by his ability, by virtue of his ability to get the ball in the penalty area and get a shot on the target, he's starting somewhere on the field. You have to put him on the field somewhere, because half the strikers on the team can't do that right now. So how are you going to get those 2 on the field together? It's kind of an open question. It's funny that Minnesota always has, designated players at the number 9 position. And invariably every year we end up having a conversation like, well, maybe Robin Lod is the solution at number 10. Maybe Bongi Hongwane is the solution at number. Maybe Sang-Min Jung. Maybe Eric Dick is the number 9 of the future. We never know.
I have argued on my Twitter timeline for years that Michael Boxall is the number 9 solution of the future for Minnesota United. You've seen that man make runs forward. It's Boxy. Boxy is the future.
I saw his attempted finish in stoppage time in the 2019 U.S. Open Cup, and I'm not ready for it. Not ready for it. Real heads
I
no.
believe in you, Boxy. Let's since we hit the striker partnership, let's talk about one of Minnesota United's better moments of the first half. Their only good moment of the first half, which was Sung-Min Jung drawing a penalty from Tim Melia. What did you think of the call to give Sung-Min Jung the penalty?
Well, first of all, I would have bet money that Tim Melia was the oldest player in MLS, and I looked it up, and he's only the 9th oldest player in MLS. So, right there, I got to hand it to you, Tim Melia. You're a much younger man than I thought. But at the same time, it looked like what it was, which was a middle-aged man accidentally lumbering into a striker and knocking him over. It was probably soft, but it was also a foul. So
it was like that's where I came down on it once, especially after seeing replays. Is it felt like a weak call because it didn't look like much, and it was the right side of the goal. Sungmin was on his way out of bounds. Like, it felt like if Melia hadn't gone down, there wouldn't have been a call at all. But
it was just
Sungmin
clumsy.
had the feet to pull the ball away from Melia and take the contact, and that's just textbook. That's what it is.
It was,
however,
it was one of those penalties where you're like, maybe it should be an indirect free kick from here or something like that. Can this be something other than a penalty? Can the penalty be moved back into the D at the top of the
bench? It's basically like that to begin with, because Tim Melia is an unkillable demon when facing penalties.
Well, you could have saved the penalty that Sang-Min Jung took. Anybody,
Correct,
anybody who just stood still
I've known it. Melia has the best record of anyone in MLS history against penalties.
Even better than Nick Rimando. Nick Rimando was the penalty king.
Unbelievable. And Sungmin's penalty, he's going to want that back. That was really bad.
That was, it was terrible.
It looked like he was in his head about it.
It's rare. It's rare that we can say actually that you or I could have saved that penalty, because sometimes you say that and, well, not really, but anyone who was standing still could have saved that.
I'm terrible at goalkeeper, and I would have gotten that one.
A garbage can sitting right where Tim Melia was standing would have saved that penalty.
Yeah,
truly awful.
The attempt has to be better than that, even if I'd almost rather you miss over the top than do that, if I'm being honest.
Yep.
So I hope that doesn't affect his confidence too much, because that did, like, his run up. He did the stutter step slow run up, and that just looked like he wasn't.
I hate
all the way.
I don't know how you feel. I hate the stutter step run up. What do you feel?
It sucks. Run up and put some power into it.
Yeah, just run up and smash it. That's our soccer expertise. That's the kind of soccer expertise you're looking for, post Loons viewers. Run up there and smash it.
Yeah, John, as you can probably tell from looking at us, John and I have played professionally on a number of different levels on multiple
several sports, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
The rest of, the second half of this podcast, by the way, just so you all know, listeners, is going to be us complaining about the Timberwolves. So get ready.
Oh, God. I don't want to talk about that right now.
Too soon, man. Soon.
In regards to Tim Melia looking old, all the best to him. I hope he's okay, but him pulling up with a hip not looking good also made him look really old.
Yep. I mean, that's what happens to us middle-aged people. Take a wrong step and suddenly stuff starts hurting.
I think he just passed the ball at a goalie and was like, "Oh, my hip hurts."
Yeah, and that'll happen.
Like, no jokes at all, none. I hope he's okay. Like, he's a legend for SKC. He's a legend of MLS. But he looked like an old man a couple times this game.
There's a man that has an ibuprofen bottle on every floor of his home.
Yep. Nothing but respect. So that was a second half moment as Melia going off hurt. That just sucks. Like, it sucks when you
they brought in a goalkeeper who
like that.
They brought in one of those goalkeepers that you look up his stats and he has no stats. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, this guy has never played soccer before.
Where it's like, if you look at the Loon goalkeeper perspective, we're going to be bringing in Clint Irwin, who has like hundreds of MLS appearances if they make a change.
For the only older person. Now, Clint Irwin wasn't even the older one. Do you know who the oldest person in MLS is right now? We're getting into the trivia questions portion of the podcast. It's kind of cheating. Let's say he's here from a different league.
How many minutes has he played this year?
He's played about 300 minutes this year.
So he's played some, but mostly off the. Is it Kai Kamara?
No, he's second. That would be the correct answer. The current oldest player is Giorgio Chiellini. So
okay, yeah,
it's kind of cheating, but Kai Kamara is a great guess.
I knew Kai had to be close. Like,
it's very. I mean, Kai Kamara is in that range where he's into that sort of athlete range where you're happy that he's still around because he's older than you. You know what I mean? He's not older than me, but it's like Nelson Cruz in baseball, where it's like, he looks old, but at the same time, it's just nice having a guy who's older than me still in professional sports.
Well, and it's one of those things also when you look at Kai Kamara. Kai Kamara was brought in for half a season at Minnesota United to try and score goals. Couldn't do it here. 2 years later, he's now scoring goals for a different MLS team.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's cursed.
It's just cursed. Like that's just reality. I'm not gonna lie, there weren't many moments to focus on in this game. I'm just gonna be honest.
Yeah. There was DJ Taylor taking a deflected shot that almost won the goal. That was mildly exciting. It was already 2-0 at that
Luis
point.
Amaria horrifically mishandling a ball in the 94th minute that he was also way offside for, and getting criticized on the broadcast for doing so.
I mean, it's always fun when broadcasters just can't handle it and just go for the criticism.
Well, I believe the phrase used was, it's hard to see a player of his skill and his ability miss a chance like that. And I'm like, I feel like some people in the comments of this podcast are going to disagree with that position. Yeah. I'm just going to.
I got to tell you, Jen Hildreth, I'm not sure everybody feels the same way as you in Minnesota.
Yep, I respect your.
I respect your kindness,
belief in him, but
yes,
I don't think I'm
find
quite
someone who
anymore,
believes in you the way that Jen Hildreth believes in Luis Amaria.
Much respect. No, I mean, they're going to trade him to another MLS team and he's going to score 15 goals. Like, just watch.
We call that the Ramon Avila.
Well, I'll bring that up from Dave Stevens. I'm disappointed you guys haven't mentioned Reynoso yet. They did at least several times on the broadcast. I'll mention him because I get to plug my piece I wrote yesterday again. Thanks.
Yes.
There's nothing to talk about is the problem. Like, I will happily talk about him when there's news about when he's going to actually be back in the fold, since apparently he's actually back in the country now. But until then, this is the team we've got. And in some ways they've been managing okay as they can be about it, but until he comes back, I forget, I think it was DJ Taylor who had the quote after the Vancouver game last week. That's just like, we've got some conversations to have between us as players in addition to like all the official stuff. So until we hear something from the team and from the players themselves, like I'm good on talking about it. I don't need to think about it yet.
And I mean, the thing is, 6 games ago, I think Minnesota United's players could stand up and be like, well, he's got a lot of apologizing to do. We're not sure if we're going to let him back in the group. You lose 5 out of 6 and draw the other one. I'm pretty sure if I'm Emmanuel Reynoso, I can walk into the locker room and still feel like, well, I think you guys might need a little something from someone. Just saying.
Yeah, just a little bit. We have a question from us, Sota Soccer, in the YouTube comments. Where's Graham Zusi on the list of oldest players?
The bosses are watching. Now I'm concerned.
You're in trouble.
I can tell you that Kansas City has 3 of the 12 oldest players in MLS, and Graham Zusi is the 11th oldest player in MLS. Roger Espinoza is the 12th oldest player in MLS.
So they've got 9, 11, and 12.
9, 11, and 12. The rest of them are goalkeepers except for Diego Chara, who is 52 years old.
We talked about center backs earlier, and we're reaching the let's talk about some guys portion of this podcast.
Let's remember some guys.
John has a trivia question of let's talk about some guys. Bringing up front of the program, Christopher Appleby on YouTube. I started thinking about Jose Aja as the good old days. That's how it's going. In regards to Minnesota's one victory in Kansas City, which none of you stats people keep forgetting about because they forgot about the playoffs. So Minnesota United is in fact now 0-8 at Children's Mercy Park since they joined MLS in the regular season. In the playoffs, in case you forgot, they stomped the number 1 seed Kansas City in Kansas City 3-0. I was at that game. There were a lot of sad Kansas City fans. It was really fun.
Nothing's better than a bunch of sad.
The one that they would most have wanted to win and lost every other one.
Lost them all in those 8 games. The combined score of those games is 22-2, Kansas City. That's hard to do.
It is. It's difficult.
Yeah.
This gets filed under. It's not actually a rivalry because we don't win.
What is Minnesota's record in Minnesota? Do you know off the top of your head? I don't know.
I've got the page up still. It's
right.
mediocre. At Allianz, they are 2 wins, 2 draws, 1 loss. And at TCF Bank, 1 win and 2 draws. So they've only lost once.
All right.
In Minnesota. But the games are like 2-1, 2-1, 1-1, 0-0.
It's not repeated 4-0 beatings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I can tell because I looked it up that of those 22-2, there was 1 goal scored each in 2022 and in 2018. And John asked me before I recorded to not look up who scored those 2 goals so that I could guess on air who it was. So in the game in September 2022, I'm going to guess that the goal was scored by Bakai Debasi.
Oh, that's, not a terrible guess.
I don't even remember if he was healthy for that game, but I'm going to guess.
Right. It was not Debasi. I'll give you a hint. It's a player who played tonight.
Boxy?
It wasn't Boxy. I'm not going to make you go through the
DJ
whole
Taylor?
It was Mender Garcia.
Mender Garcia scored that game.
Yeah. I think it was.
I could have guessed a striker, but why would you do that when talking about Minnesota United goal scorers?
Yeah, exactly. Don't start with the strikers. You start with the defenders. David had the right idea there. All right, we're going to run through all the defenders, maybe throw in a holding midfielder, maybe a goalkeeper.
It could have been a Dotson banger. I don't think it was the right time for a Dotson banger, but it could have been because he was hurt all last year, but details.
Yeah.
And then there was one in 2018, and this one, I'm legitimately going to go down. Let's remember some guys lane here.
You would have to remember about 50 guys before you got to this one, even if you started with the defenders. I think it was Tyrone Mears.
I forgot Mears played for the Loons.
Exactly. You would have had to go a long time.
I was gonna say Maximiano. You remember Maximiano?
Yes, I do remember Maximiano.
Let's remember some guys.
That's the rest of this podcast. We're done talking about Kansas City. We're just going to pull up the 2017 roster and just remember some guys.
Oh man, like the 2018 is when I started like covering the club, and that roster, even compared to this roster, is just like, boy, there's some different stuff going on there.
If you want to get people reverential, just mention Ibsen. People love them some Ibsen.
Shout out to Wes Burdine. I don't know if he was watching or not, for the Church of Ibsen at the Church of Ibsen. St. Paul. We'll do one more observer viewer question comment on here from Dave Stevens. I'd love to see Lud at right wing and Franco at left wing going forward. Bongi as a 60-minute high energy sub. Agree or disagree? How would you feel at the rest of the starting 11 in that scenario? I'll go first. Bongi needs to start. He's been arguably top 3 best player on the team over the course of the year.
Probably the best attacker on the team.
Yeah, I think Robin is above him still, but I think it's close, and that is a huge compliment to him from where he's come from last year. But I think he has to play. So
I will say I would like them to stop using Robin Lod as sort of the utility guy of putting him where they need somebody, and instead try to put him in a place where he's going to be most successful. Because frankly, using him in the central midfield, or even as a defensive midfielder, and it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked very well. He wasn't good as a central attacking midfielder. I don't think he's been good in a lot of midfield roles. I would rather them start with saying, all right, what is Robin Lod's best position? Put
him at the 9.
Yeah. Whether you put him up front, whether you put him a right wing, wherever you put him, start with that and then fill in behind him rather than just using him to fill in. I recognize that they have a great deal of respect for how he plays and his technical ability.
Don't get me wrong. I like him at the 8 a lot, and he has a lot of creative play from the 8 that has created opportunities for people that can't finish them. But I kind of agree that he needs to be further up the pitch, even though I have promoted him at the 8 before. So I don't mind him at right wing. I think like if I was going to do this with Lod right wing, Franco left wing as mandatory things, I think I'd play Bongi up top. I think I'd play him solo striker and just see what happens, and then play Sungban at the 10, and then do whatever you want back behind that. Like I probably wouldn't change anything in the back 6-7, but for the attacking 4, like I think you put you do the 4-2-3-1, you play Songben at the 10, Lod on the right, Franco on the left, and just try Bongi up top and see what happens.
Yeah, I'm sitting here trying to construct something in my head, and it's like, well, I'd like Bongi in there, I'd like Jong in there. Can you put both of them up front as forward? Basically, what I've constructed here is about a 4-2-4.
Yep.
And I don't necessarily. We've been talking about a missing midfield. I don't think it's going to be better if you've got Ariag and Will Trapp running around all by themselves in the middle of the field. So,
Chris Appleby has again submitted a comment for Let's Remember Some Guys section. Shout out to
Jiminy
Wilfried
Morgan. That is a guy right there. There should probably be an oral history. Wasn't there another guy that came in, and when I say came in, I'm not sure they existed as people, along with Wilfried Moyambi-Tarat? I don't remember. We legitimately would have to just pull up the rosters and start going through guys at this point.
Which I'm not 100% opposed to doing.
Yeah, right.
You guys get 2 minutes of me pulling up the 2018 Minnesota United roster
and just reading guys.
We're on a journey down. Let's remember some probably not actually better times. Shout out to legend of the game Alexi Gomez and the Gomez over the crossbar.
If it was worth a point to go over the crossbar, he would have been the top scorer in MLS that year.
Shout out to Sam Nicholson, who played for Minnesota that year and has been really good in Colorado kind of since.
Who did they get back in the Nicholson trade? Do you remember? It was Eric Miller and somebody else.
Go look because I have no idea.
I'm pretty sure it was Eric Miller and somebody else.
That seems right.
Because they traded Nicholson and Sam Birch? Mark Birch? Not Sam Birch. Mark Birch?
I have no idea, and I don't have a nice transactions page on Football Reference like I do for Basketball Run. Oh yeah, France Pengop. You're thinking of France Pengop.
France Pengop. I'm always thinking of France Pengop.
Always thinking about France Pengop. Anyway, that's been your adventure down Let's Remember Some Guys lane on Post Loons with David Naylor and John Marthaler. On tap for the Loons, they have a double game week this week, so some of our questions about the depth and rotation may come into play as they play at home. They're in Kansas City now. They come home to Minnesota to play on Wednesday at Allianz against Houston, who I mentioned earlier are one of the teams like them that have a less potent offense and a very strong defense. So that might be a interesting weeknight fixture to be awake for. And then they once again have how many times have they played on the West Coast on Saturday night so far this year? I'm already tired of this.
Yeah, 42.
Because it's another late night Saturday game in Portland. Portland seems to have figured themselves out a little bit after a sloppy start to the season. So it's another couple of opportunities against kind of almost everybody's above them in the table at this point. So like figure out who you can beat and do your best.
Well, I mean, that's the thing about the Western Conference this year. You look, and LAFC is obviously pretty good, and Seattle's pretty good, and then there's a lot of teams that you're not real scared of. The unfortunate part is that Minnesota is one of those teams. You're not real scared of Minnesota. Nobody's real scared of Minnesota.
Well, but then it's the problem is Seattle. SKC went out and beat Seattle last week.
No, I mean that's just MLS. You can't.
But that's the thing is Minnesota needs some that's so MLS moments, and they haven't had any yet.
MLS is an unreliable narrator. You can't depend on consistency from one week to another.
Oh boy. So it's a double game week. It's also a note that they have 6 more matches between tonight and June 3rd, which I believe is 3 weeks. Yeah, 3 weeks from tonight is June 3rd. So this is a busy season. And if you think about the fact that now they have 11 games played right now, by June 3rd, they will have played half of their games for this year.
Yeah,
I think
one
they
of those
don't
was an
figure it
opener.
out soon, they're going to be in deep trouble.
And then they get a break, except that break is entirely taken up with the League's Cup too. So there's no rest for the weary this year. Nobody's getting a summer vacation.
Yep. So now that we can end on the same negative vibes we started with, that's
Yep.
post Loons for the evening.
We got negative vibes and negative vibes.
So thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you to everybody who commented and who followed along on social media, who watched, who liked us. Thank you to those of you who are listening to this recording tomorrow at work or in your car or while you're in the shower or whenever you listen to your podcasts. Please, once again, consider subscribing and leaving a thumbs up to us. Get to us on YouTube. And
I want to say, if you're listening to this later, and you remember a guy, please tweet it at Sota Soccer, at SOTA Sota Soc. Tweet it to Sota Soc. I want a day long of people remembering some guys at.
Let's just remember some guys. That's how we'll cleanse the timeline of tonight's game. Is remembering some guys. A classic and time-honored tradition amongst fans of the game. Also consider checking out patreon.com/SotaSoccer. Look at all the exclusives you can have there. Support people like us doing content that you like because you're listening to us and you're here. So, yeah, consider that. We appreciate it. We appreciate your support. And thanks for humoring John and I as we adventured through the evening together. It's been a pleasure. Take care. Tweet at us. I'm at Prof. Cedar. He's at J. Marthaler. As you can see at the bottom of the screen, that's about all we got. Check out Jacob Schneider's recap on sotasoccer.com.
It's already up. He filed
it's already
it
up.
The final
he already
whistle.
posted it before we even started tonight. So go read that now that you're done with us. Thank you guys. Take care.